Good evening, everyone. I'm Major Garrett, coming to you from Capitol Hill, where I can assure you it is very cold and still quite breezy.
And I'm Lindsey Reiser in New York with our continuing coverage of the inauguration of Donald Trump. It's so good to have you along. The 47th president of the United States is pledging to save America from what he sees as a state of decline.
My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over.
As promised, President Trump went straight to work, signing numerous executive orders within hours of taking office. They include requiring federal workers to return to work full-time in person immediately, a freeze on all federal hiring until full control of the government is achieved, a directive to every department and agency in the federal government to address the cost of living crisis, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty, and ending the weaponization of government against the political adversaries of the previous administration. Now, many of the orders he intends to sign also include actions on immigration, fossil fuel development, and ending diversity and inclusion programs across the federal government.
First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. Today, I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill.
And on Capitol Hill, votes are getting underway on Trump's cabinet picks, the Senate voting to confirm Marco Rubio to be the next Secretary of State. So, Major, of course, we heard President Trump speak at the Capital One Arena, a markedly different speech from the inauguration speech. And at one point, he even said advisors told him to stay away from the idea of January 6th pardons, the idea of making fun of Biden and his pardons, et cetera, in his inauguration speech. But he said, I have this giant crowd at Capital One Arena, so he saved it for that.
Yeah, so let's try to summarize the day. First of all, Inauguration Day is a day of ceremony. It is a day of typically peaceful transfers of power and all the attendant rituals therein. Those rituals proceeded exactly as scheduled, exactly as they have in our country's history, with one exception. That was in 2020. We all remember what happened there and then at this United States Capitol. The other things that went on, also very typical. An inaugural address, there were songs, scripture readings, all of that normal. And then we get to the inaugural address, in which this president said the previous administration had betrayed the country, set it into something approximating terminal decline, and then saying somewhat triumphantly, I will fix all of those problems, and took executive actions that you said and summarized, some more to come at the White House later this evening, including, as the president just said in his remarks, at a shrunken, because of the cold weather, all these outdoor activities typically associated with an inauguration forced indoors, told the crowd that he would be issuing a great number of pardons for what he described as J6 hostages. Those are people who have either pled guilty or been found guilty by a jury of their peers for trespass or other more serious crimes relating to acts of violence at the Capitol riot on January 6th, 2021. That's to come later this evening. So it has been a panorama of activity here in Washington today. Some of it ritualistic, some of it typical, some of it about the peaceful transfer of power, with harsh rhetoric about the previous administration, soaring rhetoric about the promises and achievements to come, and a declaration that those who trespassed, rioted, and committed acts of violence against the U.S. government on January 6, 2021 are not criminals, as many Republicans at the time described them as, but instead political prisoners or hostages. That's the rhetoric of the president this evening.
Major, we're not letting you get warm yet. We're going to be together the entire hour. Let's go to CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns from the Capital One Arena in downtown Washington. Caitlin, you have been to more rallies than you could probably count on your fingers and toes, and then some. Is tonight's event, was that reminiscent of some of what you saw on the campaign trail?
I was going to say, Lindsay, last night I attended what I thought would be President Trump's last rally before taking office, and it seems like he's continuing them on. Today's parade, which was, of course, moved indoors because of the weather, felt very much like a Trump rally. People got here at 8 a.m. when the doors opened, but they were camped out overnight. It was first come, first serve. You heard from a lot of different speakers, and Trump, even in his speech, you heard, it was very reminiscent of a rally. I would also argue that his inauguration speech was one that you could imagine being given at a rally as well. And it was interesting because we were here inside the Capital One Arena watching the inauguration speech on the Jumbotron here. And so it very much felt like a rally speech. And you saw at the end here, after he signed those executive orders, he threw out Sharpie pens to the audience. We've talked a lot about how this is a president who, comes from the entertainment industry. These kinds of things are, part of his messaging. But it was notable, Lindsay, too, that the goal of signing these executive orders, at least some of them, at tonight's event, was a way to say to his supporters, essentially, promises made, promises kept. A lot of things that he talked about on the campaign trail, he is saying he is going to execute through executive order. Now, there are likely going to be lots of legal challenges to these orders, but these are essentially, at least from a messaging perspective, at the very least, a way to say to supporters, I'm doing what you elected me to do. And the crowd here, of course, was very receptive to that. The question becomes, how all of this moves going forward. But what Major said about the pardoning of January 6th defendants is particularly interesting because on stage here, he had families of Israeli hostages, some of whom are still in captivity, pleading for this administration to bring them home. And yet he was talking about January 6th hostages right in front of them. So that was a notable moment. But overall, tonight's event here very much felt like an extension of the campaign as he, hours after he took the oath of office.
Yeah, certainly a juxtaposition there with the Gaza hostages right behind him as he was saying those words. Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much. Joining us now is CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. So, Weijia, we know that some of the priorities for President Trump include energy, trade, inflation, and immigration. Can you go ahead and explain what his priorities are and what these executive orders will concretely do?
Well, the ones that he just signed at Capital One Arena, Lindsay, were not exactly the blockbusters that fall under those categories. And some are, quite frankly, vague, especially the first one talking about repealing 80 of Biden-era policies. We don't know exactly what they are. But to your point, that is exactly the sort of buckets that the Trump administration and the president has put into what these executive orders will ultimately be. Remember, we are told that he could sign up to as many 100 executive actions by the end of today, which or 7 o'clock p.m. We expect the president to make his way over here to the White House at any moment. And so we have to see exactly what they entail. And this is really important, whether they are an executive order or an executive action. An order actually has some meat behind it. It is detailed in the Federal Register. And we have to see in terms of immigration and the economy and draining the swamp and bringing back American values. These are the 4 priorities that the White House laid out for his day one executive action. So we're still waiting on the full text, Lindsay, of what he has already signed and what he will sign here at the White House, because that will be very telling about the extent to which the president plans to take actions on day one. But I do think it is notable that he is clearly waiting until he has the weight of the Oval Office and the resolute desk behind him to sign some of those bigger executive orders that we are waiting for, including the pardoning of those involved with January 6th. So we are closely monitoring that. I will also say, Lindsay, that, having covered Trump the first time around, the sheer number of actions he is taking today really speaks to how he has evolved as a president. On day one, January 20th, 2017. He took 2 executive actions. One was to start the process to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Another one was to freeze regulations. Today, we are talking about several dozens. And on top of that, they have been organized. They have held background calls for reporters to go over their plans. And they have really shown how they plan to use this power the second time around, Lindsay.
Weijia Jiang, thank you so much. Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez is also here. And Nancy, I know that you witnessed the inauguration speech and many of today's events. I want to ask you kind of a twofold question. One, give us a vibe check comparing today to 4 years ago, to 8 years ago, et cetera. And also, something so notable I think a lot of us saw was so many tech CEOs really being front and center, not just tech CEOs, but really the wealthy, many of whom we know either donated to President Trump's campaign or people he has lifted up and brought along with him. They're really front and center stage today.
Right. I'll take the second part first. I mean, it was really interesting to see those tech CEOs sitting down and hobnobbing with Supreme Court justices at lunch today.
Certainly. Zuckerberg and Kavanaugh.
Exactly. They had a front row seat practically to the inaugural address itself. They were sitting closer to the president than his own cabinet picks were. So the red carpet was really rolled out for them. And Elon Musk, of course, has been in the spotlight even more. He has been speaking at these Trump events. Trump himself has been introducing him, even ceding the microphone and the podium to him, which is very unusual. He doesn't even do that for his own vice president. And yet that's what's happening with Elon Musk right now. So just a sign of their influence and their importance to him. As far as the vibe, it's obviously much different than 4 years ago. First of all, we were in the throes of COVID back then, so everything was different, everything was distanced, and there was a lot of concern in the country. And beyond that, of course, a lot of the traditions that we saw play out today that are very comforting in many ways because they show this peaceful transition of power. Those just didn't happen 4 years ago. You didn't have the president of the United States welcoming the incoming president here at the North Portico of the White House. They didn't ride together to the White House in the presidential limousine the way that they did this inauguration. And certainly you didn't have the new president newly sworn in going out to the east front of the Capitol to wave goodbye to the outgoing president as he lifted off on Marine One, which today, because President Biden is now a past president, was designated Special Air Mission 46. And there is, there's power to those moments. And they simply didn't happen because Trump was angry after losing the campaign and after being impeached over his involvement in the January 6th riots. And so he left early and he skipped out on the inauguration 4 years ago.
Nancy Cortez with a flurry of activity behind you at the White House at this hour. Thank you.